Alyson Chapel didn't even know she was married to a man who was already planning her destruction. It was in the way Kelvin Hart smiled at her at breakfast, a little too perfect, a little too calculating. The same smile that had made her fall in love with him 3 months ago, that smile that whispered promises of a future she had already started dreaming about. She didn't see the other woman. She didn't see the plans for a child she could never have. She didn't see the lies that lay hidden behind every tender word he spoke. Kelvin reached across the table, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and Alyson felt a thrill that had nothing to do with breakfast. "You're beautiful," he said. "I mean it." "I know," she whispered, leaning into him. Her heart raced. She trusted him completely, maybe too completely. "Hi family, I need you to please help subscribe and watch my video to the end. Please remember to subscribe to my channel. Let us continue." 3 months. That's all it took. 3 months of late-night calls, quiet dinners, promises whispered in the dark, and relentless attention. 3 months to believe that Kelvin Hart was perfect, devoted, unstoppable in his love for her. And yet, even as she trusted him entirely, a tiny, unplaceable chill ran down her spine. The way his phone buzzed at odd times. The way his gaze sometimes lingered just a second too long on someone or something she couldn't see. She shrugged it off. Love, she told herself, made people nervous, jittery. She was simply feeling the normal tremor of new marriage. Kelvin didn't just love her. He possessed her attention. He read her moods, her silences, her wants, her fears. He smoothed her wrinkles before she even noticed them. He whispered about children before she ever asked. He mapped out their life like it already existed, and Alyson believed it, and she loved him for it. That first night they slept together as husband and wife, Alyson felt a closeness she had only read about in novels. Kelvin's hand rested on her hip, his lips brushed her temple, and she felt a trust descend over her, unshakable and intoxicating. She felt chosen, protected, wanted. The danger was invisible. She didn't know it yet, but Kelvin's hands, words, and eyes were tools of subtle manipulation. He wasn't just building a marriage. He was building a story, and she was the unwitting heroine. The other woman, somewhere in his life, was the shadow he had already begun writing. Alyson's life was a puzzle he intended to control entirely. The following mornings were perfection on display. He'd make her coffee just the way she liked it, hot but not scalding, cream swirled gently. He'd tuck small notes into her bag. "You're extraordinary. I can't wait to build our life." He'd wait for her to text him first, laugh at her jokes before she finished telling them, and remember details she had long forgotten about herself. It was intoxicating. Alyson let herself melt into it day after day. She trusted him completely, perhaps too quickly, but Kelvin made it impossible to doubt him. Every glance, every touch, every word seemed perfectly measured to soothe her, to calm her insecurities, to make her feel indispensable. She spoke about children casually at first, in quiet conversations by the window. Kelvin would smile, nod, run his hand over hers. "Soon," he said. "Soon we'll know the right time." And Alyson, swept by love, accepted the timeline without question. She didn't notice the subtle tension in his jaw, the faint pause before he said it, the way his gaze flickered to something she could not see. Alyson was building a life with a man she thought she understood, but Kelvin Hart had already divided his attention elsewhere. There was someone else, someone he imagined as the mother of the children he whispered about to Alyson. Someone he considered part of his real future while Alyson lived in a carefully constructed illusion of trust. By the second month, the signs were there if she had known how to see them. His phone was always close, face down. He was more charming, more attentive, almost aggressively so. His love wrapped her tighter around him like a cage disguised as a gift. The irony wasn't lost on him. The more she adored him, the easier it was to hide the truth. Then came Dr. Tom, Kelvin's friend, his doctor, a man Alyson met briefly at a charity dinner, introduced to her with the casual warmth of someone harmless. Dr. Tom was polite, professional, precise, someone you trust without thinking. and Kelvin had already woven him into the plan. Alyson didn't know Dr. Tom would one day hold her future in his hands, or that the trust she placed in him would become yet another tool for manipulation. In the evenings, Kelvin's charm became almost intoxicating. He would sit close, talk softly about the future, trace her fingers over hers as if memorizing the shape of her hands. His eyes would hold hers with a warmth that seemed infinite, and Alyson would forget the vague unease she occasionally felt. Every touch was a reminder that she was loved, adored, necessary. Every whisper of our children was a lullaby. It was too fast, it was too intense, and that was precisely the danger. Love this powerful moves quickly, blinds people, and masks secrets. Alyson Chapel, radiant, trusting, and alive with hope, could not see that the foundation beneath her life was already fractured, that Kelvin's smiles hid plans that would one day threaten the very essence of her womanhood. By the time she would realize the truth, the trust she gave so freely would become a weapon against her. But for now, she lived in the illusion Kelvin had crafted, and it was intoxicating, overwhelming, and utterly convincing. As she leaned against him that night, listening to his heartbeat, she didn't know the storm had already begun. The first act of their marriage had been written, and it wasn't her story. It was his plan unfolding, hidden beneath words of love and warmth that had already begun to twist. The quiet hum of the city at night masked the secret life Kelvin Hart led. While Alyson Chapel slept in their bedroom, trusting, devoted, and completely unaware, he was elsewhere, his other life waiting in shadows. The man who held her hand whispered promises of children and traced the shape of her fingers as though memorizing them, had already decided that the family she dreamed of would never include her. Her presence in his apartment, in his bed, in his heart, at least what she thought was his heart, was carefully cultivated, deliberately designed to blind her. Alyson Chapel was the perfect wife in every visible way, radiant, loyal, warm, and willing to give everything to the man she loved. But outside the walls of their home, Kelvin's attention was drawn to someone else, someone he imagined carrying the life he truly wanted. Her name was not spoken aloud to Alyson. She had no place in the light, no acknowledgement, no recognition. To Alyson, she did not exist. To Kelvin, she was the future, the mother of his children, the one he planned to love in ways he never intended to share with Alyson. It started subtly, as all infidelity does. A missed call here, a sudden meeting there, a vague explanation brushed off as work obligations. Alyson, caught in the intensity of a love that moved too fast, didn't question the inconsistencies. She trusted him without thought, blinded by the kind of devotion that leaves people defenseless. Kelvin knew this and exploited it. Late one evening, while Alyson was arranging flowers in their kitchen, Kelvin stepped outside to answer his phone. The voice on the line was soft, hushed, familiar, but it was Alyson's. The tone alone made his chest tighten with anticipation. A part of him smiled as he nodded, laughed quietly, and promised a future to a woman who had no idea Alyson even existed. "Don't worry," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. "It'll be perfect." Alyson did not hear it, and that was precisely how he wanted it. Every smile he gave her, every whispered "I love you," every plan for their home and family was a carefully laid mask, and every call to the other woman was a thread in a separate tapestry, one she would never touch. The other woman was everything Alyson was not, confident in ways that didn't rely on trust, assertive where Alyson deferred, and endlessly patient. Kelvin loved the contrast. Alyson was his dream, polished and safe. The other woman was his obsession, wild and unclaimed. She was the one he pictured carrying his legacy, the child that would carry his name, his power, his lineage. He had started preparing for the unthinkable. While Alyson spoke of future children, while she traced her fingers over his chest, imagining tiny feet running across floors, Kelvin began crafting a plan that would remove her from the equation entirely. The thought made his pulse quicken, a dark thrill he didn't share with anyone. But he had to move carefully. Alyson Chapel was devoted. She loved him with a purity and intensity that could not be questioned, and for that reason she would not easily yield. Her loyalty was both a weapon and a shield. If she discovered his intentions too soon, everything would collapse. So he played the part of the perfect husband. He listened when she talked about baby names. He joked about family traditions. He held her hand at night, kissed her forehead, and smiled at her laughter, all the while rehearsing the moves he would need to make the other woman a permanent part of his life. And then there was the message from Dr. Tom, subtle and unremarkable, but containing the seed of what would become Alyson's nightmare. Kelvin had approached his friend, his confidant in medicine, with a proposition wrapped in deceit. Alyson would never see it coming. In the meantime, Alyson's world was built entirely on trust. She planned dinners, mapped out future holidays, and imagined a nursery painted in soft colors. She hummed in the kitchen while Kelvin prepared wine for their evening, unaware that the life she imagined was only one half of a story, one that she would eventually learn had been written without her consent. Kelvin's heart thrived in the secrecy. Each time he looked at Alyson, he reminded himself how easy it was to keep her blind, how simple it was to maintain the illusion. Every touch reinforced it, every whispered word cemented her faith in him. But he underestimated one thing: Alyson Chapel's instincts. There were nights when she noticed his hesitation, the brief flickers in his eyes when she spoke of children, the subtle tension that passed between them without explanation. She filed them away as fleeting doubts, the kind love always brushes aside, the kind she thought she felt for him. It wasn't suspicion, not yet. It was a faint pulse, an unspoken warning, a rhythm she couldn't place. And in time, that instinct would become the first crack in Kelvin's carefully constructed facade. For now, though, he was flawless. Alyson Chapel adored him, loved him, and trusted him completely. And the other woman waited in shadow, patient and deliberate, the center of a future that Alyson would not survive untouched. Kelvin's heart had already made his choice. Alyson just didn't know it. Alyson Chapel had never been more certain of anything in her life than the desire to be a mother. It began innocuously, with a casual comment over breakfast. "I think I'd like to start trying soon," she said, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face as she poured orange juice into her glass. Her eyes were bright, full of hope, and entirely unaware of the darkness gathering around her. Kelvin's heart froze mid-sip. He smiled carefully. "Soon," he said, the word hanging between them. But the ease in his voice was carefully constructed, a thin mask over the surge of panic that shot through him. Not her, not now, not ever, he thought, though he would never speak it aloud. Alyson continued, oblivious. She spoke about names, about cradling tiny arms, about laughter echoing in hallways. She described a life she imagined for their family, and each word, each image should have been joyful. To Alyson, this was love in motion, a step toward the life they had promised each other. To Kelvin, it was a threat. He had thought controlling the present was enough. He had thought keeping the other woman a secret and Alyson enthralled in his attentiveness would suffice. But now, the stakes had risen. Her insistence on children made the lie unbearable, the risk too great. If Alyson carried his child, she would unknowingly secure a future he had never intended her to have. And the woman he truly wanted, she would be nothing more than a shadow pushed aside. Kelvin's mind moved quickly, calculating, rehearsing. Every conversation, every gesture, every touch had been carefully controlled to maintain trust. But now, the illusion was cracking, and he needed a solution that would protect his secret while ensuring the other woman received the life he promised. He forced a laugh. "We'll start when the time is right," he said, placing a hand over hers. His thumb brushed her skin, warm and tender, and she leaned closer, heart full of gratitude and love. She had no idea that the same hand that promised comfort also carried a mind plotting the impossible. That night, after Alyson had fallen asleep, Kelvin sat alone in their study, the soft hum of the city leaking through the curtains. He opened his laptop not to work but to search, to plan, to find a way to make certain that Alyson could never conceive. Every possibility ran through his head, every scenario, every loophole. He paused on a blank document and typed, "She cannot carry our children. How do I make it happen?" The words, unspoken to anyone, felt heavier than he expected. He paused, staring at the screen. There was no turning back now. The plan, once conceived in whispers, had crystallized in his mind. The next morning, Kelvin was back to being the attentive husband. He kissed Alyson's cheek, helped her with her coffee, and smiled as she spoke excitedly about family. But behind the charm, the warmth, the careful devotion, the first steps of a sinister plan had been taken. He needed someone he could trust, someone who could execute what he could not. That's when Dr. Tom came to mind. A friend, a confidant, a man with skill and discretion. Kelvin's lips curved in a smile, but it was not for Alyson. It was for the plan that was forming in his mind, the one that would ensure the other woman's future and erase Alyson's chance without her knowing. Alyson noticed nothing unusual. She continued to talk about names, cradling an imaginary baby in her arms. She planned the nursery in her mind, chose colors, and imagined the laughter. She had never felt more in love or more hopeful. Every word she spoke strengthened Kelvin's resolve. He nodded, listened, smiled, even encouraged her. Every second he reinforced trust while his mind schemed. By the end of the week, Kelvin's rehearsed calm had fully returned. He hugged Alyson tightly one evening, whispering, "Everything will happen when it's meant to happen." Alyson, smiling, pressed her cheek against his chest. She trusted him entirely. She had no idea how close she was to losing the life she imagined. And somewhere, the other woman waited in shadows. She existed only in his mind for now, the perfect contrast to Alyson, a future he had already begun allocating to her. That night, as Alyson slept peacefully, Kelvin made the first real move of his plan. He called Dr. Tom, speaking in careful tones, measured and calm. The words were smooth, casual, but beneath them ran the current of a lethal intention. "She cannot have children. We need to handle this quietly." Dr. Tom hesitated, and Kelvin's hand tightened around the phone, his voice steady, commanding. "I trust you," he said. "You know what needs to be done." And just like that, the seed of evil was planted. Alyson Chapel had no idea that her desire, the simplest, most human desire, had set into motion the first steps toward a betrayal she could never have imagined. She continued to dream, to laugh, to plan, to love. Every heartbeat, every hope, every innocent thought she had about motherhood made the danger closer, sharper, more precise. The darkness had begun its work, and she didn't even see it coming. Kelvin Hart's phone buzzed softly, but he didn't flinch. The message waiting was trivial, something about a meeting, but his mind was elsewhere, focused, calculating. The real work had begun. Alyson's excitement about children, her trust, her innocence, it had triggered something in him. A plan had formed, precise and terrifying. He needed someone reliable, someone discreet, someone who would follow orders without asking too many questions. Dr. Tom. The two had been friends for years. Kelvin had trusted him with business deals, investments, even personal matters. A doctor with a reputation for professionalism, discretion, and loyalty. Dr. Tom was the perfect instrument for what Kelvin intended. Kelvin called him, his voice smooth, casual, masking the urgency that pulsed beneath. "Tom, I need a favor," he said, leaning back in his chair, careful to sound ordinary. "It's delicate, very private." Dr. Tom paused, sensing something in Kelvin's tone he couldn't immediately place. "You know I'll help," he said cautiously. "What is it?" Kelvin hesitated for a heartbeat, then chose his words carefully, every syllable weighted. "Alyson, she has a medical issue," he said. "She agreed to it, but it needs to be handled quietly. I want you to manage it, discreetly." There was a pause on the other end. Dr. Tom frowned. "Kelvin, I don't understand. What kind of issue?" Kelvin's tone was casual, even affectionate. "It's complicated, Tom. You know me, I just want it done. You're the only person I trust to make sure it's handled correctly. She won't know the details, but it's necessary for her health." Dr. Tom's stomach tightened. He knew Kelvin. He had helped him navigate tricky situations before, but this felt different. There was hesitation, a flicker of unease he couldn't shake. "I don't know, Kelvin, if she doesn't understand, if she doesn't consent fully." "Tom," Kelvin interrupted smoothly, almost pleading, but with that subtle weight of command, "I trust you. That's why I called you. Please, just handle it, quietly, carefully, make sure nothing leaks. You know how important discretion is." Dr. Tom exhaled slowly. He wanted to trust Kelvin. They had been friends too long, partners in confidential matters, allies in decisions no one else could understand. And yet, something about the conversation left a cold pit in his stomach. Still, Kelvin's confidence was persuasive. His words were soft, convincing, filled with the kind of charm that made questioning him feel disloyal. "Fine," Dr. Tom said finally. "I'll see what I can do, but I need to know exactly what she's aware of. Consent is critical, you know that." Kelvin's smile, if Dr. Tom could see it, would have been warm, reassuring. "Of course, she's aware in her own way, just trust me. Please, Tom." The call ended and Dr. Tom sat back in his chair, uneasy. He didn't know the full truth. He didn't know the darkness behind the request, but something about Kelvin's insistence gnawed at him. Still, he was a professional. He would act. He would trust his friend. Meanwhile, Kelvin smiled quietly to himself. Step one had been executed perfectly. The seed had been planted. The wheels were in motion. Dr. Tom would manage the details, Alyson would remain oblivious, and the other woman, his chosen future, would remain untouched by complications. Over the next few days, Kelvin's behavior shifted subtly around Alyson. He was attentive as ever, but with a new intensity. Every kiss, every whispered word, every hand brushed across her skin reinforced her trust. He made no mistakes. His timing was perfect. He fed her dreams while quietly preparing the end of them. Alyson, for her part, noticed nothing. She continued talking about children, about her hopes for the future, and about the family she imagined with Kelvin. Each mention sharpened his resolve. Each expression of love reinforced his plan. He listened, nodded, smiled, encouraged, but in his mind a darker path had already been paved. Dr. Tom began scheduling meetings, consultations, reviewing papers, and quietly preparing for what Kelvin had requested. He didn't yet know the full story, but he sensed there was more beneath the surface. He pushed the unease aside, trusting Kelvin's words, trusting years of friendship, trusting the professional obligations that demanded discretion above all else. And so the stage was set. Alyson Chapel lived in blissful ignorance, her heart full of hope and trust. Kelvin Hart smiled, walked beside her, whispered promises of children, love, and a future that would never be hers to hold. And Dr. Tom, unknowingly, became the instrument of a plan that could destroy the life of the woman who trusted the man she loved the most. Every moment, every touch, every whispered word had been orchestrated to conceal the truth. The house smelled faintly of fresh paint and perfume. Alyson hummed quietly in the kitchen as Kelvin watched, smiling. Nothing seemed out of place, but the darkness had already entered their lives, and soon it would act. Kelvin's calm mask, Alyson's trust, Dr. Tom's unsuspecting professionalism. The combination was dangerous, perfect. One wrong move, one misstep, and the carefully constructed illusion would crumble. And that moment was approaching faster than anyone realized. The office was quiet, sterile, and smelling faintly of antiseptic. Dr. Tom shuffled papers on his desk, trying to keep track of schedules, patients, and the growing unease in his chest. Kelvin's request weighed on him heavier than it should have. The words replayed in his mind, soft, insistent. Just handle it quietly. You know what needs to be done. Dr. Tom had spent days wrestling with the unease gnawing at him. He didn't fully understand what he had agreed to. The trust between him and Kelvin, years of friendship and professionalism, had driven him to comply, but now real life intervened. Emergencies, unexpected surgeries, a consultation that dragged longer than anticipated. He couldn't perform the procedure himself. The solution was simple, if uncomfortable. He would call in another doctor, someone skilled, discreet, and reliable, someone who could follow instructions without asking unnecessary questions, someone who could step into the shadows Kelvin had crafted and play the role of the silent executor. Dr. Harlan was a surgeon he trusted, meticulous and precise, but cautious. Dr. Tom explained the situation in vague terms, careful not to reveal too much. "She's aware, somewhat," he said. "It's delicate. I need you to handle it carefully, quietly, and exactly as instructed." Dr. Harlan hesitated. "I don't know the full details. What exactly am I performing?" "Follow my instructions," Dr. Tom said, forcing calm into his tone. "Trust me, the procedure is necessary for her health. That's all you need to know." Dr. Harlan nodded, but a small flicker of suspicion crossed his eyes. Something about the secrecy felt off. He didn't press. He was professional, trained to handle uncertainty, but a small warning bell rang inside him. Still, he prepared. He scheduled the operating room, prepped the equipment, reviewed the notes. Meanwhile, Alyson Chapel continued her daily life with a blissful innocence that could have been dangerous. She chatted with Kelvin about future plans, and he smiled, the mask of devotion flawless. His eyes lingered on her, but now there was a hidden calculation behind each glance. Alyson's trust, once a source of warmth between them, had become the perfect camouflage for his darker intentions. On the morning of the scheduled surgery, Alyson walked into the hospital, light and unsuspecting. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic, warmth, and polished wood. Nurses greeted her politely, guiding her to the pre-op room. She had no idea that the surgery she believed to be routine was part of a plan to destroy her future. Dr. Harlan approached her, calm and professional. "Good morning, Ms. Chapel. I'm Dr. Harlan. I'll be handling your procedure today." His voice was steady, reassuring, and polite, but he carried the weight of doubt and caution in every step. Alyson smiled, oblivious. "Thank you, doctor. I just need this minor procedure done, nothing serious." "Of course," he said, reviewing her file. "Just a minor intervention. We'll make sure everything goes smoothly." He paused briefly, eyes scanning her chart, noticing something odd in the notes. Vague references, unclear instructions, a sense of secrecy that didn't sit right with him. But the instructions were explicit: follow them. Don't question. Do as told. As she was prepped for surgery, Alyson hummed quietly, unaware of the tension radiating off the doctor. She trusted as always. She trusted in the medical staff, in Kelvin's careful guidance, in the illusion of safety she had built around herself. Every second, every step, every mask reinforced the lie. Dr. Harlan paused for a moment before the anesthesia was administered. There was a flicker of concern in his eyes. Something about the case felt wrong. Something about the instructions didn't add up. He decided to proceed, but with caution. He would follow the plan, but he would also watch. He would not allow harm without understanding the reason. Kelvin, miles away, sat in his office, confident that the plan was unfolding perfectly. Alyson would never suspect a thing. Every detail, every person involved, every step of preparation had been orchestrated by him. The other woman waited in the shadows, her imagined future untainted by complications, while Alyson remained blissfully unaware of the danger surrounding her. As the minutes ticked by, Dr. Harlan's unease grew. He reviewed the instructions again, mentally tracing every step. Something wasn't right. He didn't yet know what, but the instincts that had guided him through years of surgery whispered a warning. Something about this case was not normal. Alyson Chapel, serene and unsuspecting, lay on the operating table, unaware that she was at the center of a conspiracy that could destroy the very essence of her womanhood. Kelvin Hart had manipulated everyone, the doctors, the schedules, the trust, even Alyson herself, to engineer the perfect plan. But even the most perfect plans are fragile. And in the quiet tension of the operating room, as Dr. Harlan double-checked everything, the first crack began to form. Because instincts sometimes are stronger than orders. The room was silent except for the steady beep of the heart monitor. Bright surgical lights reflected off the polished steel instruments. Cold and clinical, Alyson Chapel lay on the table, serene and unsuspecting, her mind elsewhere, thinking of mundane things, a small smile brushing her lips. Dr. Harlan stood beside her, reviewing the chart one last time. His instincts were screaming. Something about this case wasn't right. The instructions were clear, but the purpose, the urgency, the secrecy, it didn't add up. He glanced at Alyson, at her trusting eyes, at the faint blush in her cheeks as she tried to calm herself. No one should ever feel fear like this, unaware of the danger around them, he thought. He stepped closer, voice soft, casual, almost conversational. "Ms. Chapel," he said, leaning slightly so only she could hear, "so you're sure about this procedure? The one involving your womb?" Alyson froze. The question didn't fit. She frowned, blinking at him. "My womb? I'm not here for that. I'm here for a minor surgery." Her voice shook slightly, confusion spreading through her. The room went still. Instruments glinted, sterile and meaningless, as if mocking the tension that had suddenly taken hold. Dr. Harlan's eyes narrowed, focusing on her. "You're not here for that?" he asked again, carefully scanning her reactions. "No," Alyson's voice strengthened. She sat up slightly, though the monitors made movement cumbersome. "I don't even know why that would be on my chart. I'm just here for something minor, a biopsy, that's all." Silence fell. The monitors beeped steadily, mechanically, oblivious to the revelation unfolding. Dr. Harlan's mind raced. He recalled the vague, hurried instructions Dr. Tom had given him. Now it made sense. Something had been hidden. Something dangerous had been planned for Alyson without her knowledge. He took a step back, exhaling slowly, letting the tension leave his shoulders just slightly. She's safe for now. He realized that the moment he asked that one question, he had bought her life. Alyson, still lying on the table, stared at him, confusion and relief mingling in her eyes. "Wait, are you saying someone wanted? What?" Her voice trembled. Dr. Harlan shook his head, calm but firm. "I don't know who or why, but you need to be careful. This isn't just about your surgery. Someone close to you, someone who seems to care, may have been trying to manipulate this procedure. You almost didn't walk out of here today." Alyson's heart thudded violently. She didn't understand fully, but the weight of the moment hit her like a punch to the chest. Her trust, the trust she had given freely to Kelvin, suddenly felt fragile enough to shatter in an instant. Dr. Harlan crouched slightly to speak privately. "I need you to be honest with me. Do you know anyone who would want to harm your ability to have children?" Alyson shook her head, tears forming, anger bubbling beneath the shock. "No, I don't understand. Why would anyone, Kelvin? No, he would." Her voice broke. Dr. Harlan's eyes met hers, steady and piercing. "I don't know who it is yet, but I'll find out. For now, just know you are not alone. No one touches you without your consent while I'm aware." Alyson swallowed hard, her mind racing. Her trust in Kelvin and the life she had been building shattered in seconds. Every tender gesture, every whispered promise, every touch now carried a dangerous undertone. The warmth she had believed in suddenly felt like a lie. Minutes passed in silence. The sterile air of the operating room felt heavier, charged with the weight of nearly lost life and trust betrayed. Dr. Harlan carefully noted every detail, filing away thoughts of anomalies and red flags, vowing to investigate without tipping off Dr. Tom or Kelvin. Alyson's hands trembled, gripping the edge of the table as realization dawned. The world she had lived in, the life she thought was secure, full of love, full of warmth, was a carefully constructed illusion. And now she understood that one question had saved her future, her chance to have children, her very essence. The hum of the monitors was deafening in contrast to the silence of betrayal. Alyson's mind replayed every touch, every whispered promise from Kelvin. Her pulse raced, fear intertwining with anger. He planned this, for me, to take away what I wanted most. Dr. Hullen stood, firm, professional, yet a silent ally. He had already decided that he would not allow Kelvin's plan to continue unchecked. Alyson needed guidance, protection, someone she could trust while the deception was uncovered. She looked at him, trembling but resolute. I don't know who to trust anymore," she whispered. "Start with me," he said, calm but unwavering. "I won't let anyone take from you what is yours, not while I can stop it." The tension in the room didn't fade, but Alyson's pulse steadied slightly. The danger was real, terrifying, and close, but she had survived. And for the first time, clarity began to pierce the haze of her trust, her love, and her vulnerability. Kelvin Hart, miles away, believed his plan was unfolding perfectly. Alyson Chapel, meanwhile, had already crossed the threshold between blissful ignorance and cautious awareness. The question that saved her was simple, quiet, but powerful, and it had changed everything. The sterile glow of the operating room faded behind Alyson's eyelids as she sat in the quiet consultation room, wrapped in a thin hospital gown. The sterile smell of antiseptic lingered, but it could not mask the tension that clung to the air. She felt hollow yet alive, the shock of near betrayal pressing heavily against her chest. Every heartbeat reminded her. She had almost lost everything. Dr. Hullen closed the door gently behind him and took a seat across from her. His expression was calm, professional, but behind it, Alyson sensed an unspoken urgency. "You need to understand something," he said softly, leaning forward. Someone close to you, planned to take away your ability to have children." Alyson's stomach lurched violently. Her hands gripped the edges of the chair as if holding herself upright could keep her world from collapsing. "Kelvin," she whispered, disbelief tinged with horror. Her mind flashed to the soft touch of his hands, the warmth of his voice, the intensity in his eyes. The man she had trusted completely, the man she had built dreams around, was capable of this. Dr. Hullen nodded, slow, deliberate. "I don't yet know exactly who or why, but I know the intention was real. You almost lost your womb." He paused, letting the words sink in, watching the reaction flicker across her face. Alyson's breath caught in her throat. Tears sprang unbidden to her eyes, anger and fear interlacing. Why would he do this? I've shown him nothing but love." Her voice trembled, a mixture of fury and disbelief. "Everything I did, every gesture, every promise I believed in, was it all a lie?" Dr. Hullen leaned back, steady and calm, the contrast grounding her panic. "Not everything. You are safe now. That matters. What you choose to do next, that will define the rest of this story. You cannot face this alone." Alyson looked up, searching his face for truth, for guidance. The man who had been preparing to perform a surgery she never consented to had become the first ally she could trust. I don't know who to trust anymore," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "Start with me," he said, unwavering. "I won't let anyone harm you, not while I'm aware, but you must be careful. Watch your surroundings. Watch the people closest to you. Someone intends to manipulate your life, your very body, and I will help you navigate this. But discretion is critical. No one else can know what we're doing yet." Alyson's mind raced. Every touch, every whispered promise from Kelvin replayed in her memory. Every warm smile, every tender gesture now carried a dangerous undertone she had never imagined. And in that moment, the depth of his betrayal became unbearable. Yet, beneath the shock and fury, a strange clarity began to form. "Okay," she said finally, her voice steadier. I trust you for now." Dr. Hullen nodded, satisfied. "Good. First, you need to maintain appearances. Act as if nothing has changed. He cannot suspect you are aware. That would put you at greater risk." Alyson swallowed, the weight of deception pressing down. "So I pretend." "Yes," he said firmly. "For now, observe, take note, Keep your interactions cautious. Watch for changes, inconsistencies, anything that seems off, and stay safe." She nodded, though her hands shook slightly. Every instinct screamed danger, every memory of Kelvin's warmth twisted into a reminder of betrayal. But she also felt a spark, an ember of control she hadn't felt before. She had survived not by luck, but because someone had dared to ask a simple question. And now she would survive with awareness, with a plan, with an ally. Dr. Hullen's eyes softened slightly. "You have time, Alyson. Use it wisely. Gather evidence if you can. Observe him. Quietly, let him show who he truly is. Do not confront him yet, not until you are certain. One misstep, one misjudgment, and the plan could fail. You almost lost more than you realize today." Alyson exhaled, the tension easing slightly. The fear remained, but it was tempered by resolve. She was not helpless. She had survived the first act of betrayal, and now, with Dr. Hullen's guidance, she could prepare for the next moves. As she left the consultation room, her mind was a whirlwind of emotions: fear, fury, betrayal, and determination. Every smile from Kelvin would now be analyzed, every gesture scrutinized. She would watch him, record patterns, and learn his secrets. The man she thought she knew, the man she had given her trust and her heart to, was no longer untouchable. Dr. Hullen watched her go, silently vowing to protect her at all costs. He understood the delicate balance. Act too soon and Kelvin could cover his tracks. Wait too long and Alyson's life and future could be at stake. Every step would have to be calculated, precise, and patient. Outside, the world seemed unchanged. The city hummed with life, oblivious to the storm gathering inside one apartment, one marriage, one woman's body and heart. Alyson Chapel had survived, but the war was far from over. The first alliance had been formed, quietly, secretly, under the radar of everyone involved. Alyson's trust in Kelvin had been shattered, but her trust in Dr. Hullen, a stranger who had asked one critical question, would become the cornerstone of her survival. She walked out of the hospital not just as a patient, but as a woman awakened to the truth, aware of the darkness around her, and ready to fight back. The seeds of betrayal had been sown, but for the first time, Alyson had an ally in the shadows, a secret alliance that could change the course of everything. Kelvin Hart had always been flawless, or so Alyson thought. Every gesture, every whispered promise, every calculated smile had painted him as the perfect husband. But perfection is fragile, and even the most carefully constructed facade can crack when the truth starts pressing against it. It began subtly. Small changes in his behavior, the faintest hesitation when she mentioned children, a momentary flash of guilt or something darker in his eyes that he quickly masked with a smile. At first, Alyson doubted herself. "Am I imagining it?" she asked silently, brushing it off as paranoia. But the patterns were undeniable. One evening, as they sat together in the dim light of their living room, Kelvin's hand brushed hers, but it lingered too long and his eyes were not on hers. He was distracted, tense. "You're quiet tonight," Alyson said softly, leaning into him. "Is everything okay?" Kelvin forced a laugh, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. "Yes, everything's fine, just tired, that's all." But Alyson noticed. Her intuition, sharpened by the events in the hospital, caught the subtle shifts. The way he avoided her gaze when she spoke of future plans, the abrupt changes in topic, the slight tightening of his jaw. Something was wrong, and she was no longer willing to ignore it. Over the next days, Kelvin began to act even stranger. He avoided intimacy under the guise of fatigue, canceled weekend plans without explanation, and started dropping odd suggestions. "Maybe we should consider adoption," he said one evening, voice casual, almost too casual. "It might be easier, less complicated." Alyson froze. Adoption. It was far too early, too sudden, too deliberate. Her heart beat faster, a mixture of confusion and suspicion. "Kelvin, what are you talking about? We haven't even tried." He shrugged lightly, masking the panic that threatened to surface. "Just thinking ahead," he said, voice soft but measured. "Nothing to worry about." But Alyson wasn't buying it. The hesitation, the strange insistence, the avoidance, it all aligned with the unease she had begun feeling. She had survived an almost fatal betrayal. She would not ignore the signs now. She started watching him closely. Notes formed in her mind, patterns in his behavior, inconsistencies in stories, unexplained absences. Every word, every gesture, every phone call was catalogued silently, carefully. Alyson's trust in Kelvin had shattered, replaced by a cold, calculating vigilance she had never known she possessed. One night she followed a thread of suspicion that led her to a small detail, a call he had answered in the middle of the night, hushed tones, laughter that didn't reach his eyes. Her pulse raced as she replayed his movements, the timing, the subtle signals. Every observation confirmed her growing fear. Kelvin was hiding something, and it was deliberate. She confronted him gently one evening, testing the waters. "Kelvin, is there someone else?" Her voice was calm, but her eyes were sharp, unyielding. He froze, the first genuine crack appearing in his perfect mask. His lips parted, searching for words. "What? No, Alyson, no. You're imagining things." But she had learned to read him. The flicker in his eyes, the stiffness in his shoulders, the hesitation before he answered, all betrayed him. She didn't accuse, not yet. She observed, waited, calculated. Kelvin's attempts to maintain control became increasingly frantic. Every suggestion, every insistence, every manipulation now carried the weight of desperation. He tried to redirect conversations, to reinforce trust, to hide the evidence of his betrayal. But Alyson had grown cautious. Her mind, sharpened by the near loss of her womb, was analyzing every word, every movement, every pattern. The intimacy they once shared was now strained, laced with tension. Every touch from Kelvin was scrutinized, every whispered word dissected. Alyson no longer believed in the masks, in the perfection. She had learned too much, seen too much, survived too much to be deceived again. And somewhere in the quiet corners of her mind, a plan began to form. She would uncover the truth, expose the lies, and ensure that the man who had nearly destroyed her future could never hurt her again. Kelvin, unaware of the storm gathering, continued to act, believing the mask could hold, believing his secrets safe. But the cracks were widening, and Alyson Chapel, no longer naive, was watching. The first thread of betrayal had been noticed. The second would unravel in time. The mask was slipping. And with every passing day, Alyson grew stronger, sharper, more determined. She had survived the first attempt on her life. She would survive this betrayal too, and she would ensure that Kelvin Hart, the man who had hidden his darkness behind charm and love, would face the consequences of his actions. The stage was set for confrontation, for revelation, for truth. The pieces were moving. The mask was no longer flawless. Alyson's eyes, once filled with innocent trust, now burned with awareness. Kelvin Hart was beginning to falter, and Alyson Chapel, armed with the knowledge she had gained and the secret alliance she had formed with Dr. Hullen, was ready. The war had only just begun. Kelvin Hart had always believed he controlled everything. His life, his marriage, the people around him, even Alyson Chapel's very body, were pieces on a chessboard, moving exactly as he intended. But control is an illusion, fragile as glass, and cracks always appear in unexpected places. It started with a single message. Alyson, armed with the awareness she had gained from Dr. Hullen's warning and her careful observations, began watching Kelvin more closely than ever. She noticed his phone buzzing at odd hours, unusual meeting times, secretive calls, and hushed tones. One night, as he left his phone unattended on the kitchen counter, she couldn't resist a glance. The screen lit up with messages from a woman she had never met but whose tone, the intimacy, and the flirtation made the betrayal undeniable. Her heart lurched, fury burning hot, and clarity swept through her. Kelvin had been lying to her all along. The tenderness, the whispered promises, the smiles, they had been a mask. She didn't confront him immediately. She knew she needed proof, evidence that would leave no doubt. She combed through bank transfers, appointments, hotel stays, and whispered conversations she had overheard. Every detail, every pattern, every subtle lie fit together like pieces of a puzzle. The other woman, the secret lover, the one Kelvin wanted children with, she existed, and Kelvin had crafted the perfect deception to hide her. Alyson's next step was calculated. She involved Dr. Hullen discreetly, sharing what she had found. Together, they traced the hospital records, cross-referenced appointments, and uncovered the web Kelvin had spun. Dr. Hullen's face, usually calm, was tight with anger as he realized the extent of Kelvin's manipulation, not just of Alyson, but of him, Dr. Tom, and the hospital staff. "This is worse than I thought," Dr. Hullen said quietly, packing. He tried to weaponize the system itself against her, and the other woman, she's the reason he planned it all. Alyson's hands trembled slightly, but her voice was steady. "Then it's time the truth comes out. He needs to know I'm not blind, and he needs witnesses, so he cannot deny it." The confrontation was inevitable. Kelvin returned home that evening, expecting the routine, expecting obedience, expecting Alyson to remain blind to the storm he had orchestrated. Instead, he was met with a silence heavy and loaded with meaning. Alyson stood in the center of the living room, her posture tall, eyes sharp, confidence radiating from her. Dr. Hullen stood quietly in the shadows, her secret ally, ready to reveal everything if needed. "Kelvin," she began, calm but unflinching, "we need to talk." He froze, momentarily disarmed by her unwavering gaze. "Alyson, what's wrong?" "What's wrong?" she repeated, letting the words linger like a blade in the air. "You plan to take my womb. You involved Dr. Tom. You've been seeing another woman behind my back. Every promise, every word, every touch, it was a lie." Kelvin's carefully constructed mask faltered for the first time. His eyes darted to her, searching, calculating, but for once he found no escape. "Alyson, You have nothing to say," she cut him off, voice sharp, precise. "The evidence is clear. The messages, the records, the appointments, everything points to you. You thought you could control me, manipulate my life, my body, my heart. But you underestimated me." Dr. Hullen stepped forward, placing a folder of evidence on the table. Hospital records, timelines, intercepted messages. "Kelvin Hart," he said firmly, "this isn't conjecture. The proof is here. You attempted to destroy a woman's future, and now the truth is public. If anyone else questions it, I will ensure they know exactly what you planned." Kelvin's face paled. The confidence, the charm, the manipulation all slipping. He realized finally that the life he had tried to control was unraveling before his eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words could salvage him. The witnesses, the proof, Alyson's newfound clarity, they left him exposed, stripped of the mask he had worn for so long. Alyson's voice was steady, unyielding. "The woman you wanted children with, she is irrelevant now. You will not touch my future, my body, or my heart. Your lies end here." Kelvin's jaw tightened. Anger, fear, and desperation battled in his eyes, but the reality was undeniable. He had been exposed. Every manipulation, every deceit, every secret plan had collapsed. Dr. Tom, called in after the confrontation, arrived to review the evidence. His expression darkened as he realized the depth of the betrayal, how Kelvin had twisted him, used him as a tool to execute a horrific plan. "I've been used," Dr. Tom said quietly, shaking his head. "I thought I was helping a friend. I didn't know he intended." His voice faltered. "You didn't know," Alyson said sharply. "But I did, and I survived because of one question, because of Dr. Hullen's courage to ask it. Everything else is now in the open." Kelvin's hands trembled slightly as he faced the consequence of his actions. No charm, no words, no manipulation could protect him now. The truth had exploded, leaving him powerless, exposed, and alone in a world he had thought he controlled. Alyson took a deep breath, her chest heavy but unbroken. She had been betrayed, almost destroyed, but she was alive, whole, and awakened. The other woman, the lies, the manipulations, they no longer had power over her. The mask was gone. The truth had spoken. Kelvin Hart would never see her the same way again, and she would never be the same. Kelvin Hart sat alone in the living room, the walls closing in on him. The carefully constructed life he had built, the control he had exercised over Alyson, over Dr. Tom, over the people he thought were loyal, had crumbled in hours. His phone buzzed endlessly with unanswered calls, messages from business associates demanding explanations, and warnings from friends who had finally learned the truth. The man who once believed himself untouchable was now exposed, powerless, stripped bare. His charm, his wealth, his manipulations, they no longer mattered. Every plan he had executed, every lie he had spun, had been torn to shreds by one woman who refused to be deceived, and one doctor brave enough to ask a single, crucial question. Alyson Chapel walked into the room. Her posture was calm, deliberate. She no longer carried the fragile innocence that had allowed him to manipulate her. She was composed, her eyes sharp, carrying a mix of fury, relief, and a newfound sense of power. "Kelvin," she said, her voice steady and cold, "this is where it ends." He looked at her, searching for a crack, a moment of weakness, any plea that might restore his dominance. But Alyson gave nothing. Her calmness was terrifying, more potent than any argument, any tantrum, any manipulation he could muster. "You try to take from me what no one has the right to touch," she continued, her voice low and deliberate. "You tried to destroy my ability to have a future, my ability to build the family I wanted. You trusted yourself to control everything except the truth, and now the truth is here." Dr. Hullen stood behind her, silently confirming every word. Kelvin's eyes flicked between them, realizing the extent of his defeat. He had not only lost Alyson's trust, but had exposed himself to witnesses, proof, and consequences that would follow him forever. "You've lost," Alyson said simply. "Your control, your manipulation, your life as you thought it was, it's over, and I am walking away." Kelvin's jaw tightened. The old confidence, the smooth charm, flickered and died in his eyes. He tried to speak, but words failed him. Every argument, every excuse, every lie he might have used to manipulate her now felt futile. The gravity of his actions pressed down on him. Alyson took a slow step forward, feeling the weight of empowerment settle in her chest. She had survived the plot to destroy her body, she had uncovered the truth, and now she had the final power, the choice to leave, and she would. Dr. Tom arrived quietly, reviewing the files and evidence one last time. His expression was solemn. "I should have known," he admitted quietly, voice heavy with regret. "I trusted a friend blindly. I didn't realize what he intended." "You didn't know," Alyson said sharply. "But he did, and I survived because of Dr. Hullen's courage to ask the one question that changed everything. That's the difference." Kelvin shifted uncomfortably, realizing the truth in her words. Every whispered promise, every tender gesture, every claim of love empty, hollow, manipulative. He had underestimated Alyson's instincts, her strength, her resilience. The evidence was clear, irrefutable. The other woman, the hidden plans, the messages, the hospital records, it all painted a picture of betrayal so deep that redemption was impossible. Every ally he thought he had, Dr. Tom, the hospital staff, Alyson herself, had seen through the facade. Alyson turned, shoulders straight, chest lifted. "I will not let you control my life any longer. I will not let you touch my future. I will not be broken by someone who called themselves my husband." Kelvin's eyes darted around the room, desperate for some path to salvage his pride, his wealth, or his influence. There was none. The man who once believed himself untouchable had lost everything: marriage, reputation, and the illusion of control. "You are leaving," he finally muttered, voice hoarse, almost pleading. "Yes," Alyson replied, firm. "Alive, whole, unbroken, and wiser." She walked past him, each step deliberate, every movement radiating empowerment. Her life, her body, her choices, untouched. He had failed not because he had spared her, but because truth came before the knife. The knife he had planned to wield never touched her. Outside, the world carried on, unaware of the storm that had raged within the walls of the apartment, the hospital, the life Kelvin had tried to control. Alyson stepped into the night, breathing freely, the weight of betrayal lifting, replaced by strength and clarity. Dr. Hullen stayed behind briefly, watching her go, knowing the alliance they had formed had saved her. Alyson's future remained hers alone to write, untouched by Kelvin's darkness. Kelvin Hart remained in the apartment, a shell of the man he had been. Every relationship severed, every plan foiled, every secret exposed. He had lost the one person who had loved him blindly, the one woman he had tried to destroy. And in that loss, he found the bitter truth. Power without conscience is fragile, and betrayal always leaves a mark, sometimes deeper than the knife. Alyson walked into her car, the city lights reflecting off the windows, illuminating the tears she refused to shed, the anger she refused to lose. She had survived. Her womb was intact, her heart, though scarred, was awake. The man who had plotted against her would live with the consequences of his actions. She would live with the strength, resilience, and clarity that betrayal had gifted her. And in that, Alyson Chapel found freedom, power, and a new beginning.